Rosa, and I am a Yazidi from Iraq. And I just want to thank Canada for the care and the support that they're providing the Yazidi refugees within Canada. I don't have a question more, I have a comment and a kind reminder that up to this moment we have 2,000 Yazidi women and children still held captive by ISIS, and it's almost 5 years that our genocide is continuous. And I just wonder if the power of the world, especially through UN, if they will ever be able to do something in the ground and make change, because we are kind of waiting for these resolutions and reports and conferences to bring change on the ground, and this is the only hope that we have. But actually, until this moment, we have not seen any powers or agreements between governments that at least to attempt and rescue those who are still captive, regardless of the many that are still displaced in displacement camps more than 4 years up to now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. We will take additional comments and questions. Madam.
Thank you. Sorry if my back will be to you. My name is Diane Alayi. I represent the Baha'i International Community. I'm very grateful of hearing many points that were raised by the speakers concerning really this idea of overcoming othering, the idea of us and them, and creating this unity in diversity. One of the points that we have been able to observe in really combating this othering and therefore in creating, this welcoming of the stranger is also for the minorities to be able to work shoulder to shoulder for the betterment of the society around them with the people who are the majority. So I was wondering if you had also such examples in your countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. We'll take one last comment or question before we go to the panelists. Indeed, here.
Hi, my name is Edward McKenzie. Thank you very much for all your passionate, enthusiastic speeches. I had a question regarding the youth. Ms. McCarthy, you discussed how using grassroots movements in Operation Ezra. Mr. Sadigov, you mentioned how using professional diplomats and using public-private partnerships, but what medium is there for the youth to get involved because they are the next generation? What platforms can they use? Thank you.
Excellent indeed. Yes, we have two more then. Should we take 5 and then we react? Madam.
Thanks very much. I'm Maria Mercedes Rossi from APG 23. First of all, I would like to thank all the organizers of this event, a wonderful event, and all the speakers. Pope Francis very often recalls us about the fact that we are living in a globalization of indifference, and there is the need of a globalization of solidarity. And he's also said frequently that the big evil of our society, and also the Christian, but also other religions, is not to do. It's not enough not to do harm. Is an evil not to do good. So my question is, as an interfaith dialogue co-sponsors, states that are in this initiative, which is very laudable, are you planning also to make a joint statement in order to enhance the issue of international solidarity and global solidarity in this world that is instead raising barriers, walls instead of bridges? I think it can be very important, apart this event that is very good, but also to go to go out in the press and to speak loudly, to reverse the trend. And also here at the Human Rights Council, there is in June a resolution on human rights and international solidarity that usually is very much supported by developing countries, by the so-called third world countries, but not grasping in its full meaning yet by many countries that are still having a very big role in exercising international solidarity, especially towards the migrants. Is it not time to try to push forward to it, and also to the declaration, the proposed declaration on the right to international solidarity, as a matter of justice, not of compassion? Thanks.
Excellent, Anita. Thank you very much. Let's take one last and then we'll react. Madam.
Thank you. I'm Ambassador Hassan, Ambassador of Djibouti. Let me first congratulate the organizers for this panel discussion on a very timely and important topic. I would like to ask a question to the panelists and make a comment suggestion, let's say. I would agree with many of the comments that the panelists made and views they expressed about the efforts to integrate strangers and to welcome them first and to integrate them. Indeed, it's a process, as we could hear from their national experiences, and that everybody's contribution is needed. And I was pleased to hear our colleague Rosemary to talk about the efforts to revigorate the Istanbul process. This is, I think, it's something that needs to be done. And my suggestion would be to maybe when we will be doing that process, to try to see the synergies between existing initiative platforms and forum at international and regional levels. And I'm saying that because I think the executive director of UNITAR said something about how we could tap to existing platforms and organizations, including the faith-based organization for the implementation of Agenda 2030. And I think this is also key to help us to promote and protect human rights of all, not only because this organization have a potential to mobilize, but they have the confirmed ability to convince and guide their societies. And I'm saying that because I was educating myself about the initiative Faith for Right of OHCR, and I think it's something that we need maybe to look at in that discussion of revigorating the Istanbul process. And my question would be, how could we foster the much-needed solidarity and welcoming behavior towards strangers called for here for all of you, by all of you, sorry, without disregarding the concerns of those who perceive strangers as a threat, hence fueling hatred, xenophobia, and intolerance towards strangers? That would be my question to you.
Thank you, Excellency. I'm very humbling that you are taking the floor from that side. Much appreciated indeed. So we will react, and I would like to invite perhaps Mr. Seth to talk on youth. He has written on that, and Ambassador Mahali to also engage not only this side of the table on the issue of the resolution. But before we have some other reactions, would you like to begin, Ambassador McCartney?
Thank you very much to the colleagues, and I have learned a lot today, and also for the questions. There's a couple that kind of come together, and I'm just projecting off the question from our colleague who identified as one of the Yazidi women. And one of the things that I think is important in this room is that I think sometimes we wait for big initiatives or a movement or some government or some civil society organization. And I think that what is important is that these are individual things that we can do. It goes to your question as well around what can youth do. I mean, every single person in this room has influence at some place. You know, if you don't have influence at the kitchen table, you have influence across the fence, or you have influence with your political authorities. We all have some level of influence to effect change, to insist on action, to create policy momentum. We all have influence at some level, no matter what our age. I remember actually speaking in front of a group of senior citizens who all arrived in the room with walkers or in wheelchairs, et cetera, and I was haranguing them that they, you know, that at this stage in their life, they had to use their influence as well, because they had a lot of influence and a lot of skills. So it's not just youth, it's at all ends of that spectrum. We all have voice, we all can speak up. Sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's scary, but we all have a voice, and we need to use that voice, whether it's in a forum like this, or it's with our political parties and in multi-party states. We all have a voice, or with neighbors, or calling out bullies, etc. And so whether it's in the school, on the school grounds, in sports clubs, etc., you know it when you see it. And you know, like we often say in Canada, diversity is a fact. Inclusion is a choice. But I always say that the other end of it is, how do you make me feel? Do you make me feel like I belong? And that's individual, and it's you as an individual who determines how I feel. It's me as an individual who knows how I feel. Am I feeling included? Am I feeling isolated? Am I feeling judged? Am I feeling prejudiced? And the third thing is we all have, wallet matters, money matters. And so, you know, that Canadian sponsorship program, those are Canadians, and they're not wealthy, they're not people of means, they're just average, regular Canadians who are digging deep and finding the money to pay for the rent for 1 year in their commitment under these sponsorship programs. And so they gather friends together, hockey teams have come together, and they make those commitments. They find the schools, they get the, you know, the jobs, they find the apartment. And it's funny because I remember this one, there's so many stories about this, but there's one group of neighbors who came together and they didn't have much in common. But you know, they planned out this family that was going to arrive, and they'd committed to it, and they'd raised the money, and they did this and that. And then the family didn't arrive, and they're going, well, now what are we going to do? Because they'd gotten used to meeting and getting and planning. And they were sitting there, and they were told by the government it would be in a month or 2 months. There were some problems with visas or travel. And they said, well, like, how are we going to stay together as a group? And they decided that they'd all sign up for Arabic language classes so that when the family finally arrived, they would be able to communicate. And to me, it was one of those golden moments. You know, it's a great story. There's lots of them, but it was one of those golden moments of people, normal, average people, using influence, using voice, and digging into their pockets and putting whatever money they had on the table to make things happen. And that's why I think it's not about age. It can be intergenerational as well. It's not about youth or older people or wealthy people or faith communities. It's intergenerational, it's interfaith, it's all of those things. It's just taking action. And I get quite frustrated when people say, oh, what can I do? There's so many poor people, or there's so many, you know, refugees needing a place. So like, what can I do? What can I do? And I always think, you know, one at a time. Just break it down. It's one person, one family at a time. Everyone's just like you and me.
Indeed. Thank you, Ambassador. What we discovered before we go to the next reaction is that in our common quest as UNITAR and as Mission of Jordan to raise awareness about this resolution, what we have discovered is that there is indeed a need to exchange best practices, for lack of a better name, these examples. There is a need to foster personal participation, these examples that you just heard. So again, we invite you to consider those, and I would like to see if there are other reactions from the floor. Excellency.
Just a short reaction. Since there's been quite a few references about the Istanbul process, which is essentially a process to talk about the implementation of the Resolution 1618. And the last meeting that was held, it was actually in Singapore in 2016. And so there were no Istanbul process meeting to talk about implementation of this important issue in 2017. Neither was there another meeting in 2018. So I support efforts to reinvigorate the process. But I just want to make a pitch. One of the things we did in 2016 was that we made it a deliberate point to involve practitioners in the whole meeting and in the process. Community leaders, religious leaders, officials who are embedded in communities, policemen, academics, of course, and from different parts of the world to share their experiences. And I hope that when we reinvigorate the Istanbul process again, that we should continue to invite practitioners to share their experiences, not just because they bring a sense of realism, but it's also a chance for us to share with them what the Human Rights Council and what the UN system is doing. Without bringing practitioners into the entire process, I think what we risk is that we end up people like us talking among ourselves, talking in terms of Istanbul process and talking in terms of 1618, but people outside the room, the man or woman on the street doesn't know what we're talking about. And I think this doesn't help us in making sure that we promote greater cohesion, greater religious tolerance and harmony. So this is just a pitch. To the question to the gentleman talking about what youth can do, there was a saying that you can bring the horse to the river, but you can't make the horse drink. And sometimes, I think what we are trying to do is when I described several different programs and platforms that we hope to create, we have created in Singapore. The purpose is to make sure that the river is there. So if there are youths, if there are people from different intergenerational families and friends who want to volunteer and help, or just want to find out something about different religions and their faiths, they can do in a safe space. So of course, and I think youth play an important part, a very important part. And I will encourage you to look for these platforms and go to the river and drink. And so please do that.
Thank you, Excellency. If I may invite another reaction on youth and beyond. Please go ahead. Mrs. Ed.
My own impression is, and it's been further corroborated by what the young people in the room have said today, is that they have less faith in long dialogue and they are impatient for doing things. We heard that in the context of the Yazidi girls, and we also heard that in the context of what you asked us. How do we engage? What do we do? How do we do things differently? Our generation, slightly on the other side of the hill, are probably much more patient with the prospect of the dividends that longer-term dialogues lead. So the question then is that what are the mechanisms by which we can engage young people to do things which they want to do now rather than talk? And I was thinking of some practical ways because I tend to view these things practically. First, it has to be contextual. It depends on where you're going to work and are they homogeneous from the faith perspective societies, or are they societies which are much more diverse? Like Rosemary's example of Canada and the diversity, and clearly the kind of diversity. But there are lots of homogeneous societies too. So first, define the dialogue in the context in which you want to do it, and then promote the kind of actions you need to promote in that specific context. First, I think it's very important to express solidarity visibly. That's a very important way of showing that you are there, young people of different faiths going together to a difficult situation, to address it very visibly, politically, media savvy. Second, I think that collective action for healing and reconciliation in more difficult, tense, conflictual situations, again, is an opportunity for younger people to engage. Then, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I think doing collective action for the poorest in whatever way you can, setting up, say, nutritional or food for the hungry, or working with rag pickers in cities to be able to give them at least one meal a day, visible things like that which cut across religions and so on, and collective areas in the actions of health, in the area of education, hunger, poverty. I think that's the kind of thing young people want to engage in. But you have to define it in the context in which you're wanting to work, and set your practical things that you wish to do in that context.
Thank you, Mr. Seth. And because time is limited, you have asked for the floor, Ambassador Sadikov, and then perhaps Ambassador Mahali can close this part. Excellency.
Thank you so much. I would like to respond to the distinguished representative of the Baha'i international community on the minorities. Well, speaking about my own country, we have the Baha'is living in Azerbaijan since the middle of the 19th century. The actual numbers of this community today in Azerbaijan is not probably so big, about maybe 1,000, maybe a little bit more than 1,000. Speaking about minorities and their right to work, I would like to say that Azerbaijan is a secular country. Our constitution does not give any privilege to any religion or faith, despite the fact that the majority are Muslims, and all confessions are treated on the same level. We do not have any any limitations on ethnic or religious basis, nor in terms of the salaries or payments based on a gender factor. So everybody can find employment, and actually the development in Azerbaijan, they require more and more workforce. That's why we do not foresee any problems for the people representing different minority groups to find a job. To a question on youth, it has been already mentioned by my distinguished colleagues. Well, again, speaking about my own country, Azerbaijan is a country of youth people. More than half of the population are people at the age of up to 35 years, and that's why the youth policy is a very important part of the social policy for Azerbaijan, because you have to educate these people, you have to provide employment, you have to give them the right education. Freedom and choice, what is good and what is bad, well, that depends on the context. And so everybody has its own symbols and its own objectives. Even those who are on the other side of the barricade, somewhere in the terrorist group, they really believe that what they are doing is a good choice. Yeah, so that's why we have to be very careful and in what targets were and objectives were provided. And here I would like again to touch upon the issue of education to the youth. Now the question on the right for international solidarity. You know, this is a theoretical debate. I mean, you have your own rights from the day one you were born. And I would tend to think that in order to express your solidarity, in particular today with the internet, Twitter and Facebook, you do not need to wait for another resolution of Security Council or ECOSOC or the Human Rights Council. So that's why I doubt very much that an increased number of papers, resolutions could solve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Ambassador Mahali.
Thank you very much. And indeed, I think it was said by someone here on the podium that we have no doubt something we can learn from each other. And this was a most informative session to me, and I'm sure to many others here. And I thank everybody for their for sharing their experiences here in the panel, as well as the colleagues, the people who actually raised very pertinent questions. I would like to start with the issue on the role of youth. Indeed, the fact that half of the world's population are under the age of 30 means that they have to play an important role in everything. These young people deserve an opportunity to build a positive and prosperous future and to be part of the dialogue and the conversation we are having, and offer they may be recognized as either unable basically to positively be part of all the deliberations that go, or as victims. But the fact is that they do have a role, and we do need to make them part of the whole deliberations that are taking place. And we need to see, we need to ensure that they participate in all economic, social, and political processes, and ensure them basically decent work opportunities. We need to increase their participation and improve their quality of education and training opportunities, but we need to also engage them, and we need to look at them as actors rather than receivers. And I'll give one example of also an initiative, a resolution that we also spearheaded, which is Resolution 2250 in the Security Council, and it did all that. Basically, how do you look at youth as being part of the solution rather than the problem, as an actor against radicalization. And in this regard, a lot could be done. My country basically has created a group for youth for this 2250 resolution, and champions, also a group of champions for this resolution, specifically to push this idea. When you say 50% under the age of 30. But then again, on the question of what can we do, we have been raising awareness, UNITAR Jordan, and the panelists that some of them have been with us for the past 4 years here. And I think everybody was alluding to yesterday, and we should be moving forwards in working on implementations and the opportunities to see what we can do there. But when we discuss the issue of that was brought forward by the young lady there of the Yazidis, what can we do? I mean, today we have a global war. We have to continue our global war on terror. We need to, and this global war is not one between different religions. It's between moderates of all faith. We need to move on to see what we can do also to educate the people. We need to recognize that this information that is being promoted on different religions, we need to work on deeper mutual understanding between these religions, and we need to ensure that no one is excluded from the promise of the future, and we need to foster socially resilient and anti-radicalized environments. We need to do a lot, and when we put the to-do list, it seems to be it seems to somehow make us feel that we are not doing something. But it all takes one initiative, one place or another to bring the difference. I go back to the resolution because, as I said, there have been around 5,800 events on implementation. We need to continue working on implementation, and we need to be as inclusive as we can and engage everyone in this process. We all have something to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Before we close, I will allow, with your permission, Mr. Seth, would also like to say very briefly on behalf of the staff of this beautiful organization. We as United Nations staff members, and some of you are here, we believe in the importance of dialogue. So on behalf of the United Nations Christian Association, and I am sure of associations of other faiths as well, we embrace dialogue and we try to interact. So I will conclude this panel inviting the closing remarks to be delivered by His Excellency Ambassador Luis Gallegos Chiriboga. I must mention that Ambassador Gallegos, who is now the permanent representative of the Republic of Ecuador in New York, to the United Nations in New York, was one of the founders of the dialogue and the ambassador of Ecuador here in Geneva. Now he has been succeeded by Ambassador Izquierdo, who is also in the room, and I acknowledge him and I thank him for his presence. But we must recognize that Ambassador Gallegos has traveled from New York just to be with us today. So with that, Ambassador Gallegos, welcome back again. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alex. I wasn't ambassador in Geneva when we began the dialogue. I think I have to remember that. Distinguished panelists, dear moderators, ladies and gentlemen, it is a distinct honor to be present here today as we celebrate the annual Geneva Dialogue during the World Interfaith Harmony Week. I thank you for your invitation to participate in this event, as I have done in the other three sessions. I would like to begin my closing remarks by thanking my fellow ambassador from the Kingdom of Jordan, Her Excellency Ms. Haji Majai, as well as the UN Assistant Secretary General and Executive Director of UNITAR, Nikhil Seth, and the Director of the Division of People and Social Inclusion of UNITAR, Alex Mejia, for carrying on with this important tradition that aimed to spread the message of interfaith harmony, goodwill in the world. Also, I would like to congratulate our panelists for their profound contributions and insightful messages with which we have been enlightened today. Indeed, your reflections, examples, have made it clear how our different backgrounds, diverse cultures, and varied sets of viewpoints to share a sense of spirituality that is reflected in the longing for global solidarity, as well as the common interest mirrored in our concerns for well-being of the stranger. Dear friends, we are celebrating the World Interfaith Harmony Week that was established in 2010 by the UN General Resolution, Assembly Resolution 65-5. The vision was put forth by an address of the General Assembly by His Majesty King Abdullah II of Jordan. The resolution was then adopted unanimously, recognizes the imperative need for dialogue among different faiths and religions to enhance mutual understanding, harmony, and cooperation amongst people. Next year, we will